So good afternoon to all. This is one more conversation, one more session of our online Afro Atlantic talks. This one concerning about the gastronomy and the African cuisine and the African influence on the diaspora in other countries, in other communities. This is a project that goes along some other actions that we have been making here in Batoto Yetu Portugal, concerning all these bonds that we have with the United States and with the Afro-American community. And we have touched the percussion, music, entrepreneurship, archaeology, scuba diving, a lot of themes that have opened us a lot of new partnerships, new bridges between these two countries, between these two communities. Our association was always very close to the United States because our project started in New York by an Angolan dancer. And after it was implemented in the US, it came to Portugal. So we had this contact with the musicians. It was from them that we learned to play the traditional African drums, the djembe, the dunduns, talking drum, etc. And the dancing also from the choreographer Julio, the Angolan dancer. The association exists since 1996. Some of us started dancing, then they stopped, and they do other things that the physical activity enable us to do. So those who still are able to dance will dance. Those who play music, they play. We have a lot of intervention in the communities, like helping the documentation of immigrants, documentation of people who are born in Portugal, but sons of immigrants, and most of the time they don't have the documents. We also work with studying some of the traditional African dances that existed here in Portugal, like fandango and the danced fado. It's a kind of a Portuguese blues. And after that, also one of the last projects we are doing is concerning this danced fado, the places where these people of African origins, these Portuguese of African origins lived. So we do also some tours in Lisbon and in the south of the country concerning these African presence. We just made one interesting tour yesterday, very intense and very, very joyful, with a big group. And in those tours, the food is also always present. And there are always some histories about this connection, this bringing of specific types of rice from the west coast of Africa, from Guinea country and Guinea-Bissau, and the rice that was brought here, the knowledge of cultivating in the swamps, the knowledge of how to sail through those swamps with a specific type of boats. So we have this presence here on the regions of Portugal where we still produce rice in the Sago River and in the Tejo River in Santarém area. There are some recent investigation by some academics that have shown that the rice that produced in these regions are from Africa, the same way that in Florida also in some of the swamps this specific type of rice is also present. We have also some aromatic plants. I don't know the name in English, but it's poejo. that we still use it very often. We have found also the rice that is cooked with the blood of the chicken. It's arroz de cabidela. We also have found some torresmo, so it's the skin of the pig in a small, grilled in a small portions. Some regions of the country do it with the same tradition, African way of cooking it. And the most important until now that we have found is like the cozido à portuguesa. So it's one of the main dishes, and it has the same kind of history as the feijoada brasileira and cachupa from Cape Verde. So those dishes that had to be very energetic with a lot of beans, but that used the ears and the hands and the rests of what was considered the best parts of the animal. So those rests, those leftovers, were for poor people and for the enslaved persons also. So that's the main influence of the cozido à portuguesa, and that's why one of the regions where it's most known is in Canal Caveira, in the south center of Portugal. Canal Caveira is a region where the inhabitants came from this very strong African presence area. So just to say this, we are a youth, adult and children association. We do all these interventions. We are open to receive volunteers, to receive new ideas, to create new areas of work, and this is one of them. We have here Margo Gabriel, then she will present it herself from the United States. We have Tamika Francis. Later on, we will have another spokesperson that will enter. And we also have here Natasha Menz, that's from association from Batoto Yetu. She will later on also enjoy us with some questions. It's 18 o'clock, so I was kind of preparing to eat something. So I didn't cook it. I just have here a little dish of couscous from Cape Verde, traditional couscous, that is made of pressed corn, so very thin pressed corn, maize, so a kind of maize of corn. And we eat it like in a breakfast or lunchtime. It's one of my preferable dishes, with hot honey or with yogurt, and it's always very good when it's we cream it on top with the traditional sugarcane honey that I have here from a local production from Lisbon. So it's sugarcane made by Cape Verdeans, but from Lisbon. And this is the dish that I will be pinpointing a little bit while we will be speaking. And saying this, I will pass it to Margo. That thank you very much, and thank you to all of the other participants to gather these partners and to do this, because we were speaking online for a while, and then suddenly it was possible to meet each other. And let's hope that we can do some more things on the future. So Margo, please feel free to present yourself, your work.
Sure. Yeah.
And I will be listening, and we all be listening. So Margo.
Great. Thank you, and welcome everyone to tonight's panel. I'm really, really excited to finally, come together and talk a little bit more about just the impact and influence of African foodways, not just here in Portugal, but throughout the diaspora. I'm originally from Miami, Florida, but grew up in Boston, and I've been a food writer for the last 4 years. I currently live in Lisbon, and it's been a really unique experience just meeting different business owners and talking to different individuals and seeing how I can kind of fit in and also share their stories through my writing. So primarily I write for Cuisine Noir magazine, which is a food, wine, and a travel publication based in Oakland, California. And our whole goal really is to amplify the work of the African diaspora, wherever they are in the world. So it's been really nice to be able to share a bit of that here in Lisbon, and being able to have this discussion around African connections through gastronomy is really like the bread and butter of my work. So I'm excited to be here on this panel. We'll get a chance to, talk to Tamika, Francis, as well as Elle, Simone, Scott, who will be joining us shortly. But essentially, the work that I've been doing since I landed here in Lisbon has just been like listening and observing a lot of the businesses here, and many of them thankfully survived the COVID pandemic. But what for me is quite interesting is just the commonalities in our different cuisines. My family is from Haiti, so I grew up eating specifically Haitian food. So even I may identify as African American, every night, I was eating traditional Haitian dishes. So tonight I decided to cook something that my mom would cook often whenever we were celebrating something, and that's dili jonjon, which is a dried mushroom. Sometimes they add like dried shrimp to the dish, but it has a lot of umami flavors, and it gives the rice, when you're cooking the spices in the rice, it gives it this dark pigment. So I'll get my plate so you can see what I'm having for dinner. But it's basically this black rice. And we typically prepare it with an épice, which is like a spiced blend with citrus and different spices, onions, garlic, cilantro, parsley. I mean, it's a very common base for a lot of Caribbean cuisine. So that's, the épice is like the basis of most of Haitian cuisine. And so I wanted to sort of pay homage to this particular dish that has become one of my favorites. Another thing that's like a feature of Haitian cuisine is something we call pickles, which is basically a pickled cabbage with lots of malagueta, lots of spices. And we typically pair it with like a fried pork dish, and it's very vinegary and citrusy, and it's a nice balance. So I tend to cook with a lot of that when I'm preparing meals. And to go back to, my being here in Lisbon, I was really like surprised to see the similarities. Hey, Al. I was surprised to see the similarities between what I was, eating as a kid, and some of the dishes that, I had an opportunity to try, whether it's Moamba, which is popular in, I want to say, Guinea-Bissau or Angola. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. But that dish is like a stewed Angola.
Yeah.
Okay. So that dish reminded me of what my mom would make with beef. And that's in a red sauce with lots of okra. And tends to be a very common dish throughout the diaspora, whether you're having gumbo in New Orleans or other dishes that call for okra. So that to me, I was like, wow, there's a lot of similarities within the African diaspora and its foodways. So I was like, we should definitely be documenting this. And it's been really nice being here to just learn from other chefs, learn from individuals like yourself, Jose, and Batoto Yetu, to see the similarities and the patterns. So that's a little bit about, the work that I've been doing here.
Okay, very, very well. And Margo, how was these expatriates experience as a kind of a visitor here? why did you decided to create the project, and in what does it consist, your project here concerning
Sure.
this food?
So initially, my move here was just to kind of try something different. And it sort of happened just really by accident, visiting different restaurants in the Bica, downtown Lisbon area, discovering places like Tabernáculo by Hernani Miguel, who's from Guinea-Bissau, discovering places like Social Bee, the owners from Mozambique, and just hearing their stories really fascinated me. And I was like, oh, I should share this with, my community in the States, just so that my community can know oh, there is a diaspora here, because prior to coming to Portugal, I did not know that there was such a large polyp community. So I figured, okay, this would be a really nice opportunity to amplify the work of a lot of the African-owned businesses here. So that is really what started, the idea of pitching these businesses to my editors, and then also just connecting with people in the culinary space.
Okay. And those similarities that you found in Moamba that you spoke, do you found any more similarities in other Portuguese dishes? Because we also have a lot of influence from the Moorish period, when there were it was also African people, but Africans already colonized by Islamic culture, and they brought also a lot of the aromatics, the fruits, some of the fruits, the olive oil, all this traditional Mediterranean influence. The I don't know how to say it in English, but it's borrego, ensopado de borrego. So it's because instead of eating pig, they will eat it's like lamb, kind of lamb.
Okay.
So these dishes also have this influence. Do you find in the Portuguese cuisine some things that you will, oh, this is really quite different and quite close to what you are used to? Natasha is saying here, lamb casserole.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. I would say in terms of maybe how the Portuguese prepare certain dishes, the piri piri, for example, we have stewed meat dishes in Haitian culture. And we use a lot of spice. So I found that was very similar to maybe the way my mom would prepare a seasoned chicken dish in a red sauce. We use, quite a bit of tomato sauce or tomato paste. But I do also find that Portuguese cuisine is also influenced by spices that were, brought here through the slave trade. So the bird's eye chili, for example, that's from, I think, Brazil, and it made its way to the continent, and now it's a very popular dish here. And you have certain restaurants where that's the only thing that they serve, piri piri chicken.
I'm sorry, what did you say? The dish?
Piri piri chicken.
Okay.
So bird's eye chili, that is very, very popular. And so being able to trace, where that spice came from, and how there are so many other cultures within the polyp community that have a particular dish, whether it's, piri piri with shrimp or chicken. So, finding those similarities is always really interesting as a writer and storyteller. And oftentimes, those parts of history gets glossed over. And I got a chance to listen to a chef from Senegal talk about just the importance of elevating African spices. His name is Peter Tiam, and he's from Senegal, and he has lovely restaurants in New York. And he was just talking about the importance of, elevating those spices, because obviously through colonization, our foods changed, and we no longer had access to what we were used to. And so, being able to elevate, like, whether it's fonio, which is, particular to West Africa, or just understanding how rice got to the United States, knowing those stories, it's empowering. And so I'm always trying to use my platform to share, that type of information. Like the other day, someone had shared something about like oysters and just like farming and things like that, and how pivotal the African American community has been a part of American foodways. And
Okay.
that gets glossed over. I mean, now it's sort of changing, but it's still a conversation that needs to be had.
Okay, okay. And you spoke in New York, so the Senegalese. Why do you think we as a community, like in the diaspora or in the continent, why do you think it's important? Why you were saying that we should um, work more on that, on this on this, putting it more present. Why do you think, as a community, we should focus on this influence of the African cuisine in terms of health, for example? Our body were used for kind of ingredients, and then we are changing faster than our genetics, what we are eating. What's the importance that you feel about the gastronomy? For example, as the dancing, it's it's kind of our yoga, physically, psychological, the rhythm, the mathematics associated with it. So all this community, social gathering. And with the gastronomy, of course, we know it's a moment of sharing and an important moment for group cohesion. What do you think is, why do you think it's important that we should work on
Sure.
this globally?
It's a great question. I feel like there's so many responses to that. Like for me personally, when I think about, my mom being in the kitchen or my older sister's cooking, that's when the family comes together. That's like community building. That's, listening to my elders tell stories of their youth and things like that. So it's not for me just about like the food, but it affirms like my culture and my language, speaking Haitian Creole and things like that. So for me, it's just a really nice opportunity to affirm who I am, the language that I speak, my identity, and it's a way to preserve our culture. So when I don't know how to cook Haitian cuisine, I think a large part of who I am, like I wouldn't be the person that I am today. And so, and then I'm also like thinking about how a lot of the foods that our ancestors consumed are now superfoods. Like that to me is very important.
Yes.
So to be able to pass that information down, that is really powerful. And when those stories don't get told, then you're like, we're losing out on so much, basically.
You're speaking on passing down the information. Do you feel that your work has reached other people here? Was there any other 18 descent community, any other Afro-American or Brazilian or Cuban community that has reached you, or that has changed and thought about it? Do you feel that your work has done any kind of impact on people here, has changed anything? Because we are, as you said, we have a lot of African presence from specific countries: Cape Verde, Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Saint Tome. But there are new places where these Africans are coming. So do you feel that it make any impact on people? Like it's a different approach to see the food, what do you think about that?
Um, that's a good question. I feel like, I guess my job as a storyteller or a writer is just to introduce people and let them know like there's access to, whether it's a conference or it's meeting another chef who's from, your home country. And making those connections through my writing has been really powerful, and I hope I can continue that work here. But yeah, for me, I do what I do to create connections and to like amplify the work of other projects and other people who I feel are doing really exciting things. So I'm hoping I can continue doing that here in Portugal.
Okay, thank you, Margo. I don't know if you have anything to present right now.
No,
Okay, so
was
we'll
it.
speak on later if we have questions. So I would pass to Elle, Simone, so we could and welcome her, and so we could listen to her experience to explain us a little bit of her work, and show us the food. So Elle, welcome. It's feel free to present yourself and your work here with us.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm really deeply interested and moved to be talking about food of the diaspora and its ways of stretching and extending through so much time and space, right? Like and surviving like we do, like our food has survived as we have. And I think that there's something to be said about that and the strength behind it. I am a food stylist. Essentially, I tell a story of food with food through food, if that makes sense. I'm responsible for making sure a few publications look aesthetically pleasing, right, to whoever our consumer is, whoever the buyer of said book or magazine or publication is. And I do that for a host of other organizations. I also am a recipe tester and developer, which means that I help people who have ideas about ways they want to see food presented on a plate. I help them to create the recipe or test the recipe to make sure that it is consistent with the product that lands on everyone's plate and table. Also, me seeing food stylist, recipe tester. I produce cooking shows, things of that nature. I'm on a TV show, so I'm responsible also for the ways in which food is represented to the public through media, and all of those have a huge responsibility in terms of like representing, how people view food in the world, especially culturally, right? So I've been given a pretty large responsibility for making sure that food that I touch or food that represents people who look like me are represented in the most accurate way possible, right? And even as going as far as making sure that the people who can tell the proper stories behind that food are in place to do so, right? We just recently hired Tony Tipton Martin for executive editor at America's Test Kitchen. And she's new to us, but I'd like to say I had a role in bringing her on and making sure that we have someone else in the building who's responsible for those stories. Take it. Yes, please. All right, you're welcome. Making sure that someone else who's responsible for telling those stories is in place and can accurately be representing Black and Brown people in the U.S. So last night I cooked pork belly. I did prepare it in a very Chinese. I used a Chinese preparation, but it was only because I had pork in another way that was kind of more traditional to my family. So I wanted something a little different. So that's what I'm having. But when I think about pork in general, and how it was one of our larger offerings, post transatlantic slave, it's a most affordable meat, right? It has the most versatility you can, other than its basic fabrications, it's something you can use, they say nose to tail, right? That's one of those animals you can use. I mean, literally cooking the snout to the foot, right? To the tail, literally. Like there are people who do partake of eating pigtails. And a lot of these are preparations are very common from the south of the United States, where my grandparents actually migrated from, my great grandparents migrated from. A lot of my peers, their grandparents came from the south. I kind of have a double generation of migrated families. That means my grandmother was a child very young when she was brought to the north. So I didn't grow up with deep Southern cuisine roots, right? Like, I mean, I had the staple items, the staple soul food items that we would eat on special occasions. And I like to make it known that Black Americans do not eat soul food every day. That is not how we eat on a daily basis. It's how we eat for celebratory reasons. So like most families with Black Southern roots, we ate like that occasionally. But I grew up in the Midwest, where all the food has a very large European, and in this particular route of where I live in the Midwest, it has a very high German and Polish influence. So for me, it was a lot of the ways in which Black families used these traditionally German, Polish recipes and made dinners for their Black families, you know, is very, very much common that in my household, I would be eating corned beef and cabbage and potatoes for dinner with cornbread and black-eyed peas, right? So sometimes the cabbage, the potatoes were in the cabbage, sometimes the potatoes were in the peas. It could have been any combination, but I definitely grew up eating with a very large European influence combined into the food that my grandmother learned how to make that was Southern inspired from her mother, right? So I just like to use food to remind people that the diaspora, especially for Black Americans, it doesn't cut off in the South, right? Black Americans live all over the United States, from Alaska to Idaho to Iowa to Wisconsin to Michigan, you know, and the way that we eat is very different than, you know, our cousins from the South, you know, like it is just a very different cuisine, even just the daily basics. Like I didn't grow up eating a lot of grains, you know, like grits or polenta or corn grain, you know, like that wasn't, unless it was cornbread, I didn't really, you know, grow up eating. I grew up eating grits from time to time, but it's not a staple, right? Corn items like that. But I did grow up on like soups and stews, you know, and a lot of those were converted from like adding peanut butter to our soups as thickeners instead of using cornstarch. Like that's a very African, you know, that's something that's stretched from our African influence, you know. So I just like to remind people that, you know, the food of the diaspora for us in the United States does not stop in the South. It extends far beyond, and our food is also influenced by other things, and it looks very different in different regions.
Okay, very interesting. And you spoke about the image, no? The way you presented the way the food is already presented. What's the image of the actually at this moment in the American society of this food of African influence? What's the common knowledge of the society about it? Do they only associate it with soul food, as you were speaking, or people do they have interest in trying to know more? You know, it's considered a healthy kind of food. What's the actual image of this food?
Well, I think the image of food of the diaspora is changing in the United States in a major way. Like a lot of there are certainly more Black and brown people who are in creative control of content right, and media. And so we're getting we're getting an opportunity to look the way that we want to look in the world, right? I mean, authors like Bryant Terry, starting his foray arm of a publishing company where he is only publishing books from Black and Brown people, thus giving us an opportunity to kind of like change the image that is out in the world. I do think that people are still misconceived in thinking that Black food is primarily soul food. I do. But I do think that that depends on where you live. You know, like I don't hear a ton of conversations here in Massachusetts about soul food, right? Because we're not very close to the South. Not many of the Black and Brown people here are from the South. There are a lot of Black and Brown people here from the Caribbean and from other parts, you know, even South America, but not so much from the South. So it's regionally a different conversation. I think now that what I see happening now in media and how food is represented is that there's a collaboration of the diaspora, right? We no longer want to be considered separate food, like Black Southern food, African food, Haitian food. Like we are our food is being presented in cookbooks that is actually showing all of our foods at one time, unifying the voice, saying this is our food collectively. And while it looks different, you will notice, as Margo was saying, so many similar ingredients, right? Like this stew from, you know, a certain part of Guatemala actually looks like a stew from Brazil, you know, because of this one particular ingredient. And I think that the reason why food of the diaspora is becoming such a huge market, a huge sell, is because we really have a cohesive repertoire of ways in which we cook. You know, like you can kind of get about 20 of the same ingredients and cook a lot of the recipes in one book, if all, you know, if the recipes are truly of the diaspora. And I love that, right? And so now it's being represented in ways in which you can have it in healthy ways and ways that you can not have it in a healthy way, as with all cuisine, right? Like everyone's food has a healthy and a not healthy, right? So now we have an opportunity to really show it for real on the dinner table, you know, or in homes. So I think that there's obviously a large interest, because otherwise the rich white media would not be wanting to invest their money. So there's obviously an interest in food of the diaspora, and we are excited to, I don't like to say this, but I'm gonna say it for simplest terms. We like to show our food in an elevated way, right? We like to show it on beautiful porcelain plates. We like to show it in beautiful drinking goblets. We like to show it with beautiful plateware like we would at home, right? It's not, everything's not a family style platter of food. There are some dishes that are served individually, you know, because how much pepper is contingent upon the person, right? Right. So like, I think that there's definitely a market. I think there's a large interest in people who want to know more about our food, but even more so, I think there's a stronger mission of us wanting to make sure that our food is truly representing, like, not only who we are, but who we feel we are on the inside. I have to free my dog.
That's great. We are here speaking about soul food, but probably I'm sure I don't know exactly what it is. I have an idea of what it is. It's interesting because we are, you know, we learn here in Portugal a lot about the sailing and the sea trips that Portuguese make all around the world, but we don't speak a lot about all the people that were on the boats. We had a lot of Africans on the boats because they were the ones who knew how to read the stars, how to read the ocean currents. And so we have this record, we have finding a lot of information. Even one of the first Portuguese communities in New York, some of them were of African descent. They were Portuguese, but of African descent, and we are finding some of that information. And the soul food is also sometimes correlated with some way of cooking from Portuguese or from this mixing cuisine. Can you tell us a little bit about what is soul food, and if you had found any connection with this Portuguese culture, anything?
Yeah, I think there are probably a few. I don't know that there's any one solid definition of soul food that someone could say is exactly it and exactly right, but like you know, it is essentially the food that was created by those who were enslaved, right? And in this country, and provided with minimal food options. Not to say that they were using scraps or anything like that, but you know, like they were provided with minimal food options, and they were able to create very comforting foods. They were also using ingredients that were brought over from even their ancestors, you know, because keep in mind, slavery was actually an institution for 300 something years, right? So, you know, they're cooking with ingredients that were brought from the continent, you know, some they're using agricultural skills that were passed down to them from their ancestors who were also from the continent. And they were just making food that resonated with their soul. It's not the food that was served to, you know, to the people who enslaved them. This is the food that they created for themselves and their families. And so that is the food that we, you know, refer to as soul food. I feel like all of us who are children of the diaspora have our own soul food, right? Like I'm sure that there's food that you go to, restaurants that you visit in Portugal that have ingredients that you're familiar with, but not food that you would eat in your home, right? As a person of color in Portugal, you probably have a very different home food experience, right? And that's the difference. It's not that you don't have access to it. It's not that you cannot make it, but it's not the food that resonates with your soul, you know, or with your heritage, right? That's what those foods are, you know. And it is not so that, you know, our ancestors who were enslaved had the capability to prepare food like that every day. That was not the case. You know, there were occasions where they had more, you know, they had access to more, and those were considered more celebratory times, you know, if there were any, they were far and few in between, you know, and those moments were the ones that called for them to bring out the grains that they would use, especially, you know, or use the parts of the meat that they would use especially, right? And those are the moments that began what we know as soul food. So I think that we all have it, you know. I mean, you know, for the most part, any of us who are transported from one original place to some new place, you know, we brought something with us. It's tradition, it's food, you know, even certain rites of passage, you know. I think all of those things are involved in a soul food experience. It's more than just the food, right? It's the reason behind the food, the preparation of the food. It's all of those things.
Yes, yes, yes. In the beginning, we were speaking a little bit of this Portuguese food, cozida portuguesa, and it's our soul food for what you are saying. But it's a national dish that it's not known a lot about this African influence that he has, because it was the food for people who work in the fields, poor people, enslaved people. So it had the beans, it had these leftovers, so very similar to other dishes. And you are speaking about that, and I was seeing it as necessity made the creativity function. And we are having at the moment in difficult situation in the east of Europe, in Ukraine, and all that region is, in fact, is a region where those peoples, they were one of the first to be enslaved. Even they were even the persons who gave the name slaves, because the Slavos, the ethnicity Slavos was the one. They were so strong as enslaved persons that the names slaves came from their ethnicity, from Georgia, Ukraine, Serbia, even Russia. So all those Slavos, and that region, for example, Georgia and Ukraine, they had this history of um, bad periods of famine, of generalized famine, and they have a very good vegetarian cuisine because of that, because they didn't have more to cook. They were prohibited to eat meat, etc. So it was a very big disease, and they have very good restaurants of vegetarian food. And sometimes I speak with some of them, and they share this experience, and it's a survival experience, as you said in the beginning.
We have a saying here in the States that says necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
So that's true across the board. It's, even when it comes to food, like, it's been times, as a child of a single mother, there would be times where we would look in the cupboard and say, well, what can we make with what we have? And I think that that is some survivalist talk, like that survivorship, to be able to say, how can I create something with very little, especially if you have a lot of people to feed, you have a lot of mouths to feed. You have to be extremely creative with very little resource, depending on what your life is like. And I would imagine that for our ancestors, that was the case, learning how to make cakes from cornmeal, because that went further, like these delicious cakes we have now with like flour and sugar and, all of these things, like that was, with eggs, exactly, like they didn't, that wasn't a thing, it was hot water cornbread with a little molasses on it. My great grandmother never let me forget that for her as a child in teen was a treat. Wet sugar, yes, exactly. Like these are things that it was like, we're gonna make the best out of nothing if we have to, but you have to have something in here in order to be able to do that, and that's the soul, that is the soul part of the food. It wasn't about the ingredients ever. Now it is, because we have access, right? We're privileged, but it took something in here to be able to look at a cupboard of 5 ingredients and, come up with something spectacular. So,
and how do you have any presentation that you want to show us? Anything in particular about your work?
I do want to show you something that so I was gonna make banana fritters. Give me 1 second. Let me just show you I didn't actually get to make the banana fritters because I ate too many of the bananas, so I just went to Africa for the first time in November, and I had bananas from there that are smaller.
Where did you went?
I went to Nigeria.
Oh, okay.
And that I had the bananas there for the first time. I think I talked to Margo about these bananas for 20 minutes. They were so sweet and delicious and little compared to our bananas, right? Like, and so small. But it was just such a very different experience. And it reminded me of, like, for me, it was like, it was a personal connection, like there was something so sweet about being on the continent. My first time eating the food there, and I've not purchased an American banana since I've been back. These are the only bananas I eat. These are the only Christopher We Love Wallace about these bananas. Okay, right? This is all I'm. That's it, and I know that it seems like such a small thing, but like One, I feel like, and you asked Margo some questions about how eating our original diet can be effective to our bodies. You know, like I can eat an American banana, and as much as I love it, I promise you, it makes my stomach hurt every single time. These I have absolutely no problems with. I digest them so well. They taste delicious, but it just reminded me, and not for nothing, I was in Africa for about 2 weeks, and I felt the best I've ever felt. I lost weight, and not that I even really needed to lose weight. It was and I wasn't trying. It was just eating that natural diet had me feeling that I was in my optimal health. And a lot of people know that I've had some health challenges, but I felt so healthy. I ate so well. I ate bland. And I think that diet, you know, it was intended for us to eat that way. It was intended for us. And I think the closer we can get to our original diet, our origin food, the healthier, you know, we can be. I will still be eating pork belly, but I will also enjoy these bananas that should have been frittered. I promise you, I had like 8 of these, and I was like, I'm gonna make banana fritters, but it didn't pan out that way. But I still have bananas to brag about.
Okay. So thank you, Elle. Let's keep in touch for if you feel about them in the questions to make some conversation between us later on.
Yes.
I would pass to Tamika, and so
Thank you.
And feel free to speak.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've been over here smiling cheek to cheek because so much of what's been said before resonates. Like those tiny bananas, my grandpa used to hide them from us. We would go through them like nobody's business. So thank you for having me in this conversation. My name is Tamika Francis. I like to say by day, I do public health. By night, I'm in the food world, a culinary creative. And my work has primarily been around collaborations in the culinary space in Boston. I did do a little presentation because I kind of pulled out a whole PowerPoint together because I wanted to like gather my thoughts. So I'll share a few slides. But I think there's been so much that's been said already. I'll probably like repeat a few things, but also share a perspective. So just for context, can I share my screen? It just helps me gather my thoughts if I may. I have a quick little video as well. Am I sharing? All right. So just for context, in terms of my dish, the plan, like Elle, I had a plan, but we were in the same place today having an amazing time with some other food folks, was to make rice and beans. So Sunday rice and beans in Jamaica is our classic. Like it's the best dish on a Sunday. You have time from scratch. And so it's usually what we have. Instead, I have a bowl of rice with okras and some meat and some sauce. I love that I have it in this wooden bowl, which is somewhat similar to a gourd. And I grew up eating from gourds or from that natural element. And so rice for me is really a taste of home. And I also found that rice was a great way to connect the diaspora, as you mentioned before. So I'm going to kind of walk us through some rice conversations because I kind of like spilled into rice and then share some other thoughts with you. So people who have gone into culinary spaces, you probably hear of the mother sauces, the bechamel, the vermouth, all the fancy. I like to feel like rice is like the mother dish or the mother staple. And so as I was thinking about this, I started to think about what the African diaspora has brought to the world. And I like to think of jollof rice or wolof rice as the mother rice. And all these rices here, if you look at this slide, you probably can't tell which is which. Very many of them is a one-pot rice dish made in a red sauce with lots of amazing spices and meat. And that meat usually is a piece of ham hock here, or sausage there. It's not your biggest filet or chicken breast. It's like bits and pieces of meat to season. So there are very many of them, and I kind of like pull them in. And I have dirty rice in here, which is the one that had like the liver or offals mixed in from the South. And so it kind of like, as I was thinking about this conversation, one pot rice dishes became like a symbolic way of thinking about African diaspora's like gift to the rest of the world. There's this mother rice that came out of Africa, West Africa in particular. I won't get into the fight between Ghanaians and Nigerians as to who started first. I heard it was the Senegalese. So, but the jollof rice or the wolof rice became like that initial start. So I'm gonna share a quick video if I have time. Is that okay with you? Just to kind of center.
Yes, yes, it's all good, all good.
All good, okay. From a great source, AKA TikTok, the world's best source of information these days.
Yes.
All right, Fresh Bailey, you've been in the comments all week, loud, proud, and wrong. So sit down real quick.
Well, we are not seeing the video.
Just because you don't know something doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
One more time.
Historically,
yeah,
wherever you see rice, it came from one of two places, either Asia or Africa. You see, there are only two species of cultivated rice in the world. Oryza sativa, that's Asian rice, and Oryza glaberrima, that's African rice. And West Africans have been cultivating rice for well over 3,000 years. That's why it's known as the Rice Coast. Now follow me. Originating in Senegal, West Africa, there's a dish called wolof rice, which later became known as jollof rice. And my Nigerian, Ghanaian, and West African cousins debate over whose dish is the best. Now, in 711 AD, Spain was conquered by North African Moors and Muslims and were gifted with a wealth of knowledge and information about agriculture. You can thank a man by the name of Ibn al-Awam. His agricultural achievements were legendary, but he was a Moor and a Muslim, and the Christians of the day didn't like that, so they erased him from Spanish history. In the 10th century, Africans brought jollof rice with us, and we stayed in Spain until we left in 1492, while the rest of us were kicked out in 1609. You see, the Spanish didn't fully accept rice as cultural cuisine until the 1800s, because Moors and Muslims. And between 1482 and 1516, thousands of wolof people were living in Spain. You see, Spanish paella is nothing more than West African jollof rice. The name paella comes from the pan it's cooked in, not the dish itself. If it were named after the dish, it would be called jollof rice. Now keep this image in your head as we go forward. You see, in 1519, Cortez and them accidentally brought wheat with them to the New World. They found 3 grains of wheat under a shipment of rice. But why were the Spanish shipping rice to the New World? Well, to feed them and the free and enslaved Africans they brought with them. You see, these highly skilled and highly trained African rice farmers brought with them their knowledge of agriculture to the New World, specifically what will be now known as Mexico. Couple that with the indigenous genius knowledge of agriculture, and in 1559, they were exporting rice from Mexico to the New World. Here's how they tell the story of Africa through their cuisine. Here's arroz de mexicana, West African jollof rice. Here we've got mole and African mafe, Mexican habanero hot sauce, Senegalese cani hot sauce. Here we have Mexican banana leaf tamales. Here you have African matuke, or luwambo. Here you've got jugo de Jamaica, or hibiscus tea. Here you've got African bishop tea, tamarind agua fresca. Here you've got the same thing in Africa, where the fruit originated. There's a long history between Mexicans and Africans.
Great.
That was amazing, Tamika. That was great.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
I saw it and it's in my phone, it's on my computer, it's everywhere. I feel like it really sums up like a lot of what all of us have been saying. And this is not a competition, right? We know this, but I think that really sums up how the African influence on food just through one type of ingredient, just rice. And we can see how it permeates in all other kinds of food. So in terms of like my own lenses coming to this world, I am Afro-Caribbean, and I purposely say Afro-Caribbean because the Caribbean was colonized and has Indo-Caribbean, Chino-Caribbean, Euro-Caribbean. The Caribbean, for example, just has all different kinds of folks, but I'm distinctly Afro-Caribbean. I mean, my most distinct lineage comes from Ghana, the Ashanti people. And I'm Jamaican, from my land I came from. And in Jamaica, my mother's family is Maroon. And the Maroon are a mix of native Tainos who lived in Jamaica prior to the pre-Columbian experience, the Columbian experience. The Moorish people that you mentioned earlier, who came as cartographers with Columbus and his buddies. And then African folks who were, some were enslaved and others who were free and they retreated into the hills of Jamaica, like our Amazon region called the Cockpit Country. And they lived there for centuries. They still live there freely. And this image or kinda tree is where they gathered and spoke a language called Coromantee, which is a dialect of English, but also like a concoction of various languages so they could communicate. Now, they're super important to me because they're the ones who created jerk as an innovative cooking method, right? Imagine this. You're going to war all day trying to get some British off your land. You have to go away, but you need food. So a wild boar, a hog was usually harvested, slaughtered, existed on the coast at the time, right? You had access to plantations, you had access to salt. If you're up in the mountains, then you definitely cannot have access to any kind of salt. So it was initially a wild boar that was nurtured with just spices, habaneros, all kinds of different spices on the ground with coal or wood at the time. And that was the start of jerk.
You wanted to share something?
Sure. So that's the essence of how it jerks. So that's
now it's on.
Yeah, thank you. That's where my interest initially came. I grew up doing high school food and nutrition, and I noticed that most of the text at the time had very Eurocentric values and very Eurocentric ways of teaching about. But when I go home, I add something different. I found that there's a disconnect between those two things. So I came into the culinary world having that rich experience of coming from the Maroon people and have always kind of navigated how as a Black woman in this space who grew up, I came to the US in my 20s, right? So somewhat fully formed in some ideas and some opinions, but also learning to become Black in America. And for me, having a tiny son has been the way I become more conscious of what Elle talked about earlier, like Southern food, for example. I've been making my tour around the country, trying to learn Cajun versus Creole and Southern food. And for me, there is just a big connection that really goes back to the motherland, to the African experience. And that has been just a really amazing experience to be learning through. The work I do is really about food and community and making connection, primarily for BIPOC folks. So for those in Portugal, BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, and people of color. It doesn't exclude folks of Eurocentric descent, but it really centers their experience and really elevates our experience to tell a more full story versus, I think, what has been historically like a linear story. So like someone said earlier, like, soul food isn't just cornbread and fried chicken. Soul food is a food that came from innovation, that came from joy, that came from the little time you had to yourself on a Sunday, you make the best meal you can make. So I'm super excited to be like exploring that work right now. Recently, again, I think I've been delving a lot, and there's a lot of folks who I have to really respect in this space, like Stephen from like Whetstone, and there's a bunch of folks, who's doing amazing work. But African food and their food story is not synonymous with enslavement. I think very often the story is told that African food came from slavery, but the food predates slavery. There was like amazing experiences of okra and spices and rice, as you earlier heard, that came prior to the Colombian colonization experience. And I think the more we can lift that up and tell a full story, that what we have here in the West or in the Americas is a version of African-inspired food. The food existed prior to folks being taken away. So like there's this word nyam, which is a Jamaican Creole word that means to eat. So you nyam. And
we say in Creole, nyami. Nyami is to eat. Creole from Cape Verde.
Live learning, right? So Jamaican Creole, it's nyam, which is to eat a yam or nyam, eat fast. So you're just telling me again, the connection here. So pre-Columbian experiences around food existed long before enslavement. And usually bothers me a bit when I hear our story being told and starting with enslavement, because we obviously existed and had amazing feasts prior to enslavement. So that global influence has come across the world. And I have an image here of the Gula Geechee. I was in South Carolina and honor the low country of America where the rice cultivation really took place. And Gullah Grub was one of the first Black-owned, like Gula people-owned restaurant in the country, and they then were formerly enslaved, but also free people who brought rich rice cultivation to the South of America and the Low Country. And then, there's this renewed interest, right? African food is trending. Like for the last trend, but I do think we want to lift up that it has been trending for those who are from the region forever. It's not a trend, it's not on trend. This is just how we eat, and wanting to really respect and honor that while it's a trend in mainstream media, there are folks who've been like keepers of tradition and holding this heritage and holding this history for thousands of years. In terms of gastronomy in the past, I'm just going by the questions that we were asked. This is me on the floor in Kampala at a market. I swear I know this guy. Our people tend to look alike. I went to the market. I told this guy, I know you. He goes, I've never met you. I go, I know, I've never been here before. You've never been to, but I know you. I've seen you before, right? And for me, it's like my origin story. Like my people exist and I find them through food, literally in market, like a family member of mine. And so for me, it feels spiritual. So I've heard that Black or food that's called soul, it's named after a non-physical part, right? So it comes from inside, it's spiritual. You can conjure up the food, even if you've never had it before. It just comes out of you, like you know it. It's spiritual. It's folklore. I learned a lot about food through Anansi stories. Anansi came out of Ashanti tribe, So Anansi story would tell you stories about when you had too much sugar, what it caused. So there's always really a lesson sometimes behind these food stories that was either warning you or showing respect for the elder in some way or some form. And it's health. Again, Elle, we didn't talk about this, but literally if you eat your own food, it's so nurturing that you know it when you have it. If you have your own food, you feel like, okay, that felt like I've had it before in a time before, right? So you know your own food, it really encourages and nurtures you. And I find as folks are going back or reverting to natural experiences, gingers and turmerics and tubers, it really speaks to our body in a way that's ours versus processed food, for example, or lots of different pastries that are newer to our region that we've been having. So for me, gastronomy and African descent is really about spirituality. It's about storytelling and passing history along, but it's also about health. And by health, I don't mean just physical, but like your whole health. A lot of questions about emerging. So I am still learning, I'm still emerging. I like to partner with folks and be in service of this work. I a researcher at heart. I like to understand where things come from. How do we connect folks of Latin descent, those of Afro-Latina descent with those of Afro-Caribbean descent, right? There's always a lineage to connect through. And then really building platforms for collaboration. Like this for me is exciting that we are of different experiences, but we connect through this one distinct way. I had the honor of being in Portugal last fall. This is one of the best dishes I've ever had. It was at Hernandez. Sorry, I'm butchering names.
It's okay.
It had rice, right? So you started in a good spot for me. If you have rice on the plate, it's only uphill from there. So this is rice with a coconut stew with curry. And again, the spices of the spice trade, the rice, was seafood, it was a conversation, it was a people. I think most times you ask a person about the best meal they've had, they almost never just tell you about the food, they usually tell you about the environment, right? So food and community and food and people come together. So I felt renewed because there was so much of Portugal's food scene that resonated. Portugal wine, I grew up having black cake in the holidays made from Portugal wine. I had no idea. So I traced the lineage. Portugal wine became common in the West Indies, for example, again, through the transatlantic slave trade, but it really resonated with folks to make a cheap but very delicious holiday cake that was just sugar, flour, the cheapest wine you can find that's very available, lots of brown, spices and so forth, and it's a black cake. It was connection. I have never seen as much bacalao in my, I've never seen bacalao in the way I like, there's bacalao on every street corner, right? And our national dish and very many of the Caribbean and also other places is codfish, salted cod. Again, we'd exchange sugar and molasses and spices and rum for cod. And as someone who is not Massachusetts native, but I live in Boston, the cod is like our national, like our state fish through the Cape of Cod. And there's this amazing Cape Verdean community in Dorchester, one of the, you know, most vibrant neighborhoods. And so from back and the Cape Verdean connection, my codfish people. So I really found in Portugal's history of spreading salted codfish throughout the world. Brown folks across diaspora really connect to that. And there were just amazing history lessons about how the food of Portugal came out of like the full stories. Just for context, in college, I studied Brazilian Portuguese. Don't test me, I don't know more than 3 words. But I came into Portugal's experience through Brazil, one of the largest Black, countries, so to speak. So it was just really an amazing experience to go to Portugal and then really see that connection in real life. So that's it for me. I think it's just really that story of I came to my work through food. I came through my work through initially wanting to correct the textbooks that told a linear story that wasn't the fullest story. I remember questioning my high school teachers, why does the book say we should do lacto-ovo vegetarian meal? Like, what does that mean? And then you go home and you realize that, oh, that's how you eat anyway, because you're the rest of our tradition and you eat ital, so you tend not to eat a particular way. But then in the Eurocentric way, they had like language that I didn't quite get, that took away what was inherently ours and made it into something else. So I'm excited for the future of these collaborations and like really more full stories about food from the African diaspora. So thank you so much.
Thank you a lot, Tamika. It was very interesting to complement with the information that we already know.
Okay.
And yeah, and it's very close with what we in the association with what we like to do is not focusing on the period of the transatlantic slave trade, because this influence is previous, stronger than what we know already. There was this historical information about African connections from West Coast countries and the Americas previous to Columbus, or even Columbus make that reference that Africans were exchanging products with the American population. Even today in Cape Verde, when the fishermen in the small boat, sometimes when there's an accident and they lose control of the boat in the storm or something like that, it's very fast for them, like 7-10 days, and they will be caught in the Brazilian Ocean and they will be alive. So in small boats. So this connection is much easier than it is presented to us. Like it was really unknown ocean and an unknown continent. So I think that showed at the same time in what you presented as like the food was already there. There was more information about it, and the food was there because the persons were also already there. So the Africans were already also present. And about the Spanish influence, the paella that I didn't knew, we have made a partnership with Miguel Rosales. He has made a documentary. It's called Gurumbe, and it speaks about this African influence in the dance flamenco, like the same way we studied about fado in Portugal. So it's like fado, tango in Argentina, and flamenco are all with the same origins, with this African influence, coastal cities. So the paella it's a no surprise, since they had this strong, this strong connection with this community. So here Margo is all saying is that the dish that you presented from We have Nani, the muqueca de camarão, possivelmente. Very delicious. We will have to meet each other at Hernani's as soon as possible. And Tamika, I don't know if you have anything more to say, or I will pass it here to Natasha. Is also a member of the board and of the association since the beginning, and she is the expert on food. I'm only a taster, and Natasha is the one who deals with this theme. And so, Natasha, if you can present yourself and a little bit of your work in this area, and maybe you have some questions from what you have seen. So,
yes. Hey, good afternoon, or maybe good evening to some of you. For me, it's like good evening. Thank you so much, the three of you ladies. It was really, really, really inspiring presentations. And you always learn something. You know, it's really amazing to see how it's becoming, I mean, the word trendy is probably not the best one, but how it's becoming more and more important to discuss these issues around food, especially food made by Black people or promoted by Black people. I'm the founder of this platform called Taste Black History. I'm Angolan. I'm based between Angola and London. The idea behind Taste Black History is really what you all are doing. It's really to research and to promote African and Caribbean cuisine, gastronomies, and also the techniques and the procedures that were used before the slave trade and that are now being rescued today. I mean, we'd like to think of food as having the power really not just to educate and to entertain, but also to employ people. So it's kind of like a three pillars. Through food, you're able to educate and also make people grow in terms of becoming more self-aware of themselves. Also to promote the idea behind I am strong, I'm African or I'm Black, and I'm strong. And it could be done by and through food. Also the power to entertain. And I think, I mean, all of you have spoken about different occasions where food was used to being promoted. And is one that I think we should capitalize more on, is the power to employ and to elevate African and Caribbean people or people of Black descent. Let's use the opportunity that is becoming more trendy, and let's just use this word, just put it out there. Let's really use the opportunity that now it's on the mainstream. I'm in Dubai at the moment, representing at the Expo 2020, I'm representing Angola at Expo. We have 2 restaurants at the Angola Pavilion, and it has been amazing to see the interest, not just of the locals, but also everybody that is visiting Expo. They want to know more about African food. They want to taste. And when they do, they get hooked. So there is really a huge opportunity, economic opportunity to really leverage what we have, because there is quality, there is history, and there's essence to what we do and what we have. So let's leverage that. It's important to have the identity being stronger, and our kids to grow knowing that, okay, this rice actually is not only by the Asian. We also had this 3,000 years ago. And actually, maybe some of my ancestors took it on the ship when they were when they were brought to the US. And that's why this Carolina rice is so famous and so profitable. So let's honor that, but also let's capitalize on what we have. So really, I didn't have a question for all of you, but it was really just maybe if you could explore more this element, the economic element that food can bring us and can leverage and can elevate more of us all around the world, especially because there's so many of us doing this in the continent, in the diaspora. So how can we really capitalize on this opportunity? What can we do? I know especially in the US, there's loads of networks and platforms where Black chefs get together. But how much more can be done, and how can we really utilize this to make it happen for us? So just leave it a comment. And once again, thank you very much for your presentations, and to kind of open up more horizons for everybody that is listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Always a pleasure to speak with you. So when are you finishing in Dubai?
It's in a week or so. Yeah, end of the month. Expo is finishing. And then I'll be heading to London. So hopefully, I'll be able to meet some of you guys there. We can go for a chat.
Okay.
And something to eat, definitely.
And how is the reception of Angolan food there for the people?
No, it has been really, really well received, and people are very amazed. Most of our dishes are traditional, but we are also doing some fusion, and people are just like, wow, so much flavor. Unfortunately, we were not able to bring some of the produce that we wanted to bring from Angola. So we basically using what we find locally. But it's just how we marinate again, going back to the processes, how we marinate, how we slow cook. And then Elle spoke about how we present the food. Now, if we want to be at the same level in the sense of having the same visibility as the other types of cuisines, you do need to step up in terms of presentation. So that's really, really important. And especially here in Dubai, what I feel is that more than anywhere else that I've been, people eat with their eyes. So if it looks nice, and then on top of it, it tastes amazing, it's a winner. So definitely changing that narrative that African and Caribbean food is just like loads of food on a plate. It doesn't have to be like that. And that's what it can be in some occasions, but it can also be something else. And that's what we're trying to also change. And people really do get amazed because they never thought that African food could be served like on a fine dining, for example. When they see a nice plate and they're like, is this African food? No. And I said, yes, this is African food. And it has been really, really, really good. So yeah, loads of opportunities here in Dubai and the United Arabs. So if you do want to come down and do something in terms of promoting, I think this is definitely a place to invest. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. And did you how was your approach to the gastronomy? We met each other in the beginning of cultural part of Batoto Yetu, the dancing. But how was your personal connection with the gastronomy? Was it something like natural, or you have any professional proximity with someone from family, etc.?
Yeah, to be honest, and I think it's not going to be different from many of us. My grandmother, she used to do food and sell it. And then my mom, she's an amazing cook and she loves cooking. So I think it comes from there. Now, from there to take it to a more professional level, it was pretty much, I love entertaining, I love networking, and the opportunity to do both came about. So I started to organize some high-profile events in London, promoting African food. And then I started to do some projects. We have been to Angola with different chefs. I work with a variety of chefs, mainly African Caribbean. So we went to Angola, we went to Brazil, we went to Hong Kong, Jamaica. We went to the Food and Drink Festival in 2019. Yes, we didn't get to visit the Maroons because we were hoping they would give us the recipe for jerk, but they said, no, this is secret. Yes, but we've been to different places and we have put together different chefs. Like we had BJ Dennis from South Carolina. He came to Angola. We had Anthony Cumberbatch. He's from Barbados, but he also specializes in Jamaican food. So he also went to Angola. Then we had a Brazilian chef. coming to Angola, Nigerian going to Jamaica, and Angolan going to Jamaica and Brazil. So it was like a different collaborations at different times. And just to touch on preserving, yes, we think that, okay, we have to go to the continent to really learn what is happening. Sometimes we're mistaken, because just like any other continent, we evolve all the time. So the cuisine is not the same as 300-400 years ago. Now, when we went, for example, we went to Bahia, from Luanda to Bahia, Salvador in Brazil. And we started to look, they have a lot of the candomblé, the Yoruba or background and influences, and also from Angola. So when we started to look at some of their traditions, some of their foods, they were the ones that were able to keep the real procedures, the real foods. It's not in the continent, because continent, we are evolving every day. So now when you go back to these small communities, like you have the Gulagichi in South Carolina, you have the Yorubas in Bahia, and that's where you get to see a lot of these ancestral recipes and the procedures, how they continue to do so. So this is a great opportunity to really explore, document, and this is part of the work that we do, really to get chefs to understand the origins of the food that they're doing, also educate them and influence. So when they present something on the plate to, not to all their clients or guests or friends, then they can have a story to tell. So it's more meaningful, and it gets people thinking, and they start thinking, oh, how can I eat sweet potato every day? Listen, start importing from Angola, starting from South Africa, get your honey from Kenya or Rwanda. And those are the things that we try to do through chefs, get them to understand the origins, create opportunities for them to collaborate among different countries, but then also become ambassadors for what we produce and also what we're trying to promote. Sorry, I think I got lost in the middle in terms of the question that you asked me, but it's okay. I just threw some information there. But yes, in a nutshell, that's it.
Very good, very good. I just shared here some questions that we had exchanged previously with Margo. I would leave it open. So after we have all listened to each other, so if you feel that you still have to answer this, you haven't touched these themes, or if you have any question to share to each other, so feel free to open the mic.
I noticed one of the questions about representation in in the industry, and I think even just listening to you, Natasha, name off some chefs that you've been able to work with. I am the founder of an organization called She Chef that supports women of color, specifically Black women, in culinary, food, beverage, and hospitality spaces. And there's a huge underrepresentation still of women in these professional spaces, and I know that they're there because most of the men learn to cook from their mothers, so I know we're out there,
They are taking over, they're taking over our space. I'm sorry. It used to be a predominantly woman.
But I have noticed in islands like Barbados, when I visited there, I did some cooking for the Food, Wine, and Rum Festival, and noticed that a lot of the chefs in that kitchen, in that particular kitchen I worked in, were predominantly women. It was, I think, maybe 60-70% women, which gives me a lot of hope, but also lets me know that there are not a lot of women in the leadership positions, who could perhaps end up in Dubai, like yourself, and I definitely would implore all of you to, when you're out in the world, not only eating, but cooking and employing, ask those male chefs, like, who are your sous chefs? Who are other women chefs? Ask them to bring them out, Ask them to allow them to accompany them on trips and collaborations, you know, so that they can be more visible. I think that is extremely important, especially in terms of like how we want our culinary traditions to continue. You know, like we need all hands on deck, you know, we need all of the cooks, you know, in the kitchen, you know. I think it's those of us who are very connected in the culinary industry, we know each other, and it's very easy for us to pull out our most popular names, especially because they help to make the money, they help to sell the events, they bring in the crowd. But we're gonna have to pass this tradition on, or we'll have a period of time where we're losing, you know, tradition. Like there's a time between chef Leah Chase, chefs, you know, who else am I? Edna Lewis, you know, even Tony Tipton Martin, right? Like there's a gap in between that age group and us, you know, and it's because being a well-known Black chef in those spaces was so coveted, no one wanted to make room for the next generation. They wanted to hold on to it as long as they could, right? Because it was very difficult for them to get the positioning that they got, and it was understandable. It's forgivable. But you know, now we need everyone. We need Black writers, food writers, we need Black food stylists. You know, that's why I use Bryant Terry as an example, as an author, because his book, Black Food, is not just a book about Black food. The photographers were Black. I was the recipe tester. I'm Black, obviously. The rest, you know, like the photographer, the food stylist, he decided to have an all Black. This is a literal Black book. It is literal, even to the fact that the book is Black, right? Making those sorts of intentional, you know, intentional requests and intentional decisions. If you are a decision maker, if you are a stakeholder or key holder, you are empowered to say, we need more women cooks here. I need you to bring all your women cooks, you know, or, you know, whatever we see that is missing, we need to be the ones there to, you know, bring it. Like I'm pretty sure we should have more Black reporters there in Dubai for the expo, telling stories about the expo. Like there should be some article. Margo should be in Dubai right now, writing about the success of the Angola, you know, restaurants, you know, nice. Because you know, there are two of them. Like we should be insisting, you know, like my team includes a Black writer, 2 Black women chefs, you know, whatever. Like we are key holders, we are the game changers, and we can call those shots, and we should, in order to keep from having to repeat telling me we shouldn't still in 5 years. I don't want to still be hearing stories about rice. People, y'all know where rice comes from now. You know, like now it's time to focus on the food and every bit of the diaspora that has something to bring to the table, right? We should not still be explaining to people the jollof rice versus rice and peas. I mean, I'm glad that the information exists, but in 5 years, I don't want us having that conversation again. Y'all know, you already know, you know, now it's time to show and prove and highlight these cuisines. So if you want some help finding women chefs, if you need someone to call upon the chefs to find the women chefs, I'm your person, and I'll put that in the chat.
I just wanted to, sorry, Jose. No. I just wanted to add something quick to what Elle has just said, is that, yes, it is important to promote more Black women in the industry, but more importantly, I think, is to make sure the conditions for them to be there are met. Because unfortunately, a lot of us, hello? Sorry, I got cut off. Yes, unfortunately, a lot of women that want to be and are in the industry at one point of their lives, even because of motherhood or because they are their primary carers to many, they have to then make that decision and kind of like slow down. So I think it's really important, and there was a question about career in the culinary arts that is really important, especially for Black women. We do carry a lot of on our shoulders. It's important that the conditions are there for them to be part of the conversation. Otherwise, we will be like on a loop, really, forever on the loop. So yes, more Black chefs, but with the right conditions for them to be there and to stay there. Yeah, so I just wanted to add that.
Stay there.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to chime in to add to a little bit to all the great conversation so far on the question around advice to young folks. I mean, I'm young too, but I definitely think, at least in my experience and those who share with me, the narrative I heard was there's a linear path to being in the food space. So you become a chef and you follow the French brigade system. You start staging, then you start doing potatoes and you move your way up. I respect and definitely honor that system. You become somebody's sous for 25 years. And if they retire, you become chef de cuisine, right? I respect the brigade, the system, but I do think there's more space now to enter the culinary world in different angles. Right, style, bake, cook. I mean, there's just so many more, I think, avenues to get you contribution to the food space. So if any advice I have to folks, figure out what your thing is, what your why, what your mission is, what drives you, and then find your space in this world that is through food. If someone would have told me years ago that food styling, like I knew things look pretty, but I had no idea you could craft a career around putting cheese on beautiful marble slab. So it looks amazing. So I do think I wish we tell more stories that arriving as chef de cuisine may be your goal, but there are other avenues to bring your skill, bring your mission, bring your why to the food story, and really open the narrative to say there are other ways to be here. That's one thing I would add. And then in terms of like continue these conversations about like projects, I'm going to plug here. I am working on myself along with somebody else working on this platform called DutchPot for the very reason we talked about. I think there's so many of us who are orbiting each other and work in this space together. And very often you want to collaborate and the best and brightest or the most popular person is called in, but they're emerging chefs and artists who want to be part of these spaces. And so the idea behind this platform is that you share collaborations and invite folks to be a part of it. There's a space for either collaborations to build community like the one I'm at today, collaborations that are paid, that's revenue sharing, that's just for the purpose of sharing more knowledge. And so for me, we could email each other to death back and forth, or we can share spaces where folks can opt in, bring their talent and their time, and then opt out and go back to their daytime thing or their own brand. So I'm really trying to build a space for more collaboration that's intentional and doesn't seek to highlight any one brand or any one person, but it's really a collective idea behind it. So we're working on these days.
Nice.
I also want to mention, just to kind of piggyback off of what Tamika mentioned about like this idea of networking across, and Elle, mentioned it. And if you know of any opportunities, like I always try to be cognizant of any like writing opportunities, or there's a call for pitches, like sending somebody a DM, and like that's proved really like impactful to my writing career. So it doesn't have to just be about like food writing, but of course if there's any like fellowship opportunities, like She Chef is like a wonderful organization to just plug women chefs into opportunities that otherwise they would never know about. So I think the space is going to be really interesting to watch, and I'm excited to be able to participate in future events with Batoto Yetu.
Okay. Anything more concerning these questions I sent here in the chat? Or I was listening, and I was also thinking, does any one of you know of any city or any country that has a list of Afro-inspired restaurants? Do you know any online information about it? Because we would like to do something concerning with that here in Lisbon, in Portugal, and that will be also inspiring to others that would like to work on this area so we know that we have catched two crises, the pandemics. Previously it was economic one, then it's the continuation of the pandemics and with the war. So a lot of things open up and a lot of things closed. We know that, but there's some instability on the field. But there are some regular institutions, and that would help people who are interested to come to consume. For example, during the pandemics, I met a lot of people who were like trying to send food from Uber, and the African restaurants were like very scarce on the platform. Now it's a little bit more frequent, but it continues to be scarce. So if you know any kind of list that on your countries that would be useful for inspiration for others, that would be also nice to pass it down here on the chat, so later on we could share it on our web pages. I don't know if I have I'm without the camera. I don't know if I have a lot of more questions. I will let you if you have any question to each other to say it, because I think it's so rich, so much. There is so much richness in what we have talked, so many things that we could do, that we should put our hands in work and try to make it happen. And so just to say our disponibility, we are a small association. We are not an enterprise. We don't have any kind of business mentality or procedure. It's more culturally, and to try to reach more people, to sensitize the majority of the population, to give the self-esteem to the communities concerning this field of gastronomy, so that people know the importance of not. Someone spoke about the gap between the generation gap between the ancient cuisines and chefs and the actual. And I felt that. I don't know if it was because I was a man, but my mother wouldn't allow me to cook in the house. So it was like something that I would be not allowed me, but there was a time I was interested in trying to know more, and it was like, well, why would you need to? And in the professional level, with the chefs, it's sad if there is this losing of information. So this we have to, I think we have to make an effort to reach the youngsters in a kind of way that they could drag them to feel interesting to work on it, because the marketing of other types of foods is really strong and really goes everywhere. So saying that, if no one has any more question, we will finish. Fabio, I don't know if you have any question or if you are just hungry.
I'm just hungry. I will eat right now.
Okay. So I think it was a very interesting conversation. Thank you very much to all of you. I wish we could do something together physically, and we could share a moment together as soon as possible. And thank you all. We will keep on touch with each other. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the
Thanks for
opportunity.
having us. That was great.
Okay. Anything
Right.
that you need also in terms of contacts, you can reach us in the association. So we will have another Afro Atlantic project soon, and we will be here on the same platforms. Then we will record this on the YouTube, and we will share it in our YouTube channel, and we will hope that it will be a way to connect to more people interested in this area. So thank you very much to all. Have a nice week, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Care, guys.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.